Hello, Screen Junkies, and happy Monday. Here to break down the box office, as always, here on Screen Junkies News. Roth Cornet is out on assignment, so who better to talk about the business of Hollywood than our own Billy Business?
Dude, so stoked. I love charting with Dan.
Charting.
It's my favorite thing here.
So much fun. So let's just get to it, the top five. No surprise, of course, It. Number one movie once again, $60 million, about a 51% drop, that's for a horror movie is good. That's pretty standard for a blockbuster, especially when it opens around $100 million. A lot of horror movies drop 60, 70% in their second weekend. So for it to be holding at about 50%, not bad. Not, an amazing hold like we've seen for some other movies, but not bad at all. Just going to show you that people are still going out to see this movie.
Yeah, word of mouth is almost universally positive. I have to think this one's probably going to have legs throughout the Halloween season.
Yeah.
Obviously I don't think it's going to be bringing in $50-60 million all the way up to Halloween, but I would imagine it's going to have a healthy box office run.
I mean, if I were Warner Brothers, I would kind of let this play through September, maybe pull it back and put it back out around Halloween. Yeah. You could probably get some extra money out of that.
Yeah, maybe like an IMAX event or something. Make something big out of it for Halloween, especially because no one really saw this one coming, so definitely one I want to see again.
Yeah, not to this degree for sure. It was anticipated that there would be a race for the number 2 spot, but it actually turned out to be won pretty handily by American Assassin. That came in at about a little under $15 million. The movie was made for $40 million, so that's not bad. This is a movie I actually saw this weekend. Despite the reviews, like the Rotten Tomatoes score on this movie was really poor. It's in the 30s. I have to say, I was really honestly a little surprised at that, because it's certainly not an exceptional movie, but I found it to be perfectly serviceable in the spy genre. And really, more than anything, particularly towards the end of the movie, Michael Keaton goes full Keaton, like 110% Keaton. American Assassin is a movie that I would recommend, and I was really surprised by the low Rotten Tomatoes scores for this movie, especially in contrast to the high Rotten Tomato scores for the number 3 film, which is Mother. I kind of am seeing now where, for a lot of people, there's the disconnect of a movie like Mother, which is incredibly divisive, even among critics. It still is up there. It's the first time I've ever seen a certified fresh rating taken away from a movie.
Wow.
It was given certified fresh, and it got taken away over the weekend. It's at about 68%. And then American Assassin, which I will acknowledge is a bit middle of the road, but I think it's well acted, well shot, has such a low score. I think I can see this divide, where people are saying like, well, wait a minute, why is this movie, which is incredibly divisive, so hailed, and this one, which is average but good, really getting a lot of negative marks? So
yeah, I think the thing that we're seeing with Mother 2 is, and we've talked about this before, it's like, I'm not quite sure if they marketed this to the right crowd. Like I said, when I saw it, there was a specifically cut trailer for, in 1 week, come back to this exact same theater for like the most traumatizing thing you'll ever see. And I don't think the It crowd that was there with me that Saturday night wanted to see Mother.
No, let's look at, Mother opened at number 3. It opened below where it was projected to. It opened at $7.5 million. This is a movie that was made for about 30. And yeah, this was it got the dreaded and rare F cinema score, basically meaning as they polled the audience members and said, what would you rate this movie on a score from A to F? Most of them get B's, even what we call terrible movies. Like a B- is a disastrous cinema score. A B- is something that says like, oh wow, the average audience really didn't enjoy this film very much. Mother got an F, and I agree with you. This was not marketed, I think, at all in a proper manner. I mean, Paramount. This is a movie that it's so weird and divisive. Like, this is the kind of movie that you should open in LA, New York, I think. Get the critics. A lot of critics who are going to give this, get them to review it, get the buzz going, and then slowly roll out. And looking at the movie itself, it's not a movie that I cared for. Just not my speed at all. A lot of people liked it. I didn't. But looking at it, it is not a movie that you just shotgun onto a general audience, particularly, like you said, with this marketing campaign they had, which was like, this movie will blow your mind. You will never be the same. And marketing it as this mystery, thriller, horror movie. It is not that. And I honestly think this is kind of a cynical move from the studio. I think they knew that this movie was going to be divisive. I think they knew that this movie was not going to have word of mouth, or at least not positive word of mouth. And I think they said, our only chance to make money from this movie is to market it as a horror movie and shotgun it onto as many theaters as we can and just grab the opening weekend and grab as much money as we can, because this is not going to be something that's appealing to a mass audience. And I don't think that's the right way to market a movie, because it's just going to make people more cynical.
Right.
And just more distrustful of what the trailers are telling them, and more on their heels about any movie that's marketed in a certain way. A24 did the same thing with It Comes at Night. It Comes at Night wasn't a horror movie. A24 marketed it as a horror movie, and then people went to see it, and they came out of that movie saying, like, I hated that movie. It's like when you tell people, when you set them up to expect a certain thing, and then you give them something radically different, I just don't see how that's an effective marketing strategy.
I mean, we saw it even going back to another divisive movie, The Grey, which was marketed as this action movie. Now, I saw it after the fact, so I watched it for what it was, and I was one of the people that ended up enjoying it.
Yeah.
But I think the problem with something like Mother is there was this talk beforehand that it was going to be like Rosemary's Baby, that it was going to be, they're marketing it to the kids who are going to see Conjuring and Jigsaw, and this is an art film.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it was the hubris of like, well, it's got Jennifer Lawrence and she can open it. I'm not sure exactly what their strategy was, but it didn't pay off.
I mean, I think if I'm Paramount, or if I'm, someone that's going to finance a movie like this, I don't think the solution is give Darren Aronofsky $30 million and then lie to people so that we can get it back.
Right.
I think it's like, give Darren Aronofsky $5 million and then you can make your money back. But they made a general audience play for this movie. Did not work. I will be very curious to see what the drop next. I think it's going to be an abysmal drop next weekend. People are not going to tell people to go see this movie. So yeah, I just think it's not so much a movie. It's a divisive movie, and that's a lot of Aronofsky's work. But to sell it like they did, I think was a major misstep. The rest of the top 5 were holdovers. Home Again, which opened last week, versus It, holding it at number 4. Hitman's Bodyguard, still in the top 5. Wow. That's a late summer release that, it's hanging around. It's at about $70 million. Again, not a blockbuster, but a nice little chunk of change for that movie. That's another movie. Bad Rotten Tomatoes score, connected with the audiences. Audiences enjoyed that movie. And again, that's one that I would recommend. So I have my own thing about Rotten Tomatoes, as I've done on this channel, about just you really have to look at what they're telling you. But I also think that people might actually be getting frustrated with critics in general, because you see these movies that are average, not great, but average for their genre, that get bad reviews. And I kind of feel like some of these movies are just being punished for not being exceptional, which not every movie's going to be exceptional.
Exactly. I think we've almost been trained to, and it's just because of the way that like the internet and everything works, everything has to be the best or the worst. And it's like, sometimes I just like those lazy Saturday afternoon, like, I always think of Tommy Lee Jones, Benicio del Toro's The Hunted. Yeah. I really like that movie, but it's the perfect example of a lazy Saturday afternoon movie, which sounds like American Assassins was, and Hitman's Bodyguard as well.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the top per screen. It won last weekend. It dropped down a little bit. So actually, we're back to our small opening. Top per screen was actually a Ben Stiller movie called Brad's Status, written and directed by Mike White. He wrote the screenplays for Orange County, School of Rock, Beatriz at Dinner, which came out this year, and the Emoji Movie. One of those things is not like the other.
I was going to say, it's very
strange. Don't know where that came from. $22,000 at 4 screens. So kind of a, coming of age for Ben Stiller. He's taking his son to college, and he's kind of having like a midlife crisis.
Another one, huh? Greenberg, wasn't that another one where he was kind of having
also had Walter Mitty. He's been going through a lot of midlife crises. A lot of crises for Ben Stiller these days.
Ben Stiller?
I hope you're all right, Ben Stiller. That's one that's going to be rolling out wide. A nice limited release. We'll see if that opens wide as the movie does. Wind River kind of did that already this summer. Small opening that goes wide. So we'll see how Brad's Status does. Well, let's take a look at Darren Aronofsky, his top openings, and the only consolation that he gets this weekend, I think, other than some people liked his movie. I don't think he really gets off on box office. I think the studio probably does. He doesn't so much. I think he got probably the reactions he wanted.
He already said his piece. So.
He said his piece, and he got it out there, and I'm happy for him, and I hope that it's all out of the system. But I guess the only consolation that Paramount has is that Mother was actually Darren Aronofsky's Swann's second highest opening weekend. Now, there are some caveats. The Fountain opened on a Wednesday, so that opening weekend was a little lower. Black Swan and The Wrestler opened in very limited release, so that number for Black Swan, it may look low, but that's actually exceptional numbers for the limited release that it got. So this was kind of one of the second or third. The Fountain opened on about 1,400 screens. Mother on a little higher than that. Noah was obviously a big blockbuster kind of opening, which
kind of like Emoji Movie. I feel like Noah is the one out of all of these that doesn't really fit in.
It doesn't really seem to fit, does it?
Yeah,
and that was with
strange.
Paramount, and that's Aronofsky's highest grossing film. I think they probably thought, hey, we did it with Noah, maybe we can do it with Mother, because Noah had definitely had some Aronofsky stuff whipped in there. So Mother, even though it's a little bit disappointing, probably not as much as Paramount went. In the Aronofsky world, it's not a bad opening.
Right.
I'm sure they wish that they would get a bigger return on their investment. But I want to talk about It, because one of the big headlines about It this weekend was that it is now the highest grossing September release ever, which is true. But if you adjust for inflation, and I just found this to be a really fun, weird group of movies. Adjusted for inflation, this is actually the U.S. domestic highest grossing September releases. It's still in the top 5. It's number 4.
Wow.
Number 1 is Crocodile Dundee, which if you don't know, Paul Hogan, 1986. He was actually that movie was nominated for an Oscar. That was a phenomenon. That movie. And that's not a life. People could not get enough of Crocodile Dundee. The next year, Fatal Attraction, another Oscar-nominated film. I believe that one was nominated for Best Picture. Rush Hour was not, but that was a very popular movie. It's probably going to end up at number 3 above Rush Hour. I don't think it's going to get to 350 or Fatal Attraction is. And then number 5, and I never realized this movie was that popular, it's a comedy called The First Wives Club with Goldie Hawn, Bette Midler, Diane Keaton. Oh, yeah. I remember it coming out. I didn't realize it was as popular as it was.
One of Mom's favorites.
One of so many Mom's favorites. Love The First Wives Club. So
I didn't realize that Rush Hour came out in September. That seems like a quintessential summer movie.
I always thought it came out in August. I even looked at it too. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that coming out in August. No, it came out in September.
Crazy.
So,
yeah, because I think part 2 and 3 came out in August.
It seems like they did.
Yeah.
But now I'm just questioning my entire reality.
Your entire life. What is happening?
What's happening? I don't even know. So it dollar-wise, if you don't adjust for inflation, now the highest grossing movie ever released in September. But even when you adjust, still in the top 5, going to probably end up at number 3. Either any way you cut it, it's doing really well.
Do they spend $35 million or do they spend way more for part 2, thinking, oh, it's going to be a hit, let's spend more money?
I think you spend as much as you need to. I mean, they made this first It on $35 million. It looked pretty good to me.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
You know what's better than money is more money if you don't spend as much. So
you get to keep as much.
Exactly. Let's take a look at the domestic box office where It jumped onto the chart in its second week. Comes in at number 8, jumped over Dunkirk, jumped over Lego Batman movie.
Wow.
That's probably going to be number 6 by the end of the week, and then probably going to jump Despicable Me 3. It'll be the number 5 grossing movie of the year at some point. Get Out had a great run in the top 10, dropped out, bumped out by It, but how great that a tiny, tiny little movie like Get Out was in the top 10 for so long.
Right.
Might end up being the most profitable movie of the year regardless. So farewell to Get Out, but what a great run for that movie in the U.S. top 10.
Yeah, it seems like these kind of smaller budgeted things are just creeping their way in there, you know?
They are, which is great. I mean, we last week I got the chance to interview Jason Blum and Chris Landon, who directed the movie coming out called Happy Death Day, but we got to have a great conversation about just that, kind of the idea of making a movie on a small budget and being not having to pump so much money into it, and you can get those returns. Jason Blum was a producer on Get Out. He was a producer on Split too. Like the dude produces he literally banks. If he puts a movie out, it quintuples its money
somehow.
But it was a lot of fun to talk to him. That actually is going to come out a little bit later. Really fun interview. So check for that here on Screen Junkies News. And finally, I want to look at the international box office. A little bit of news this week. Wolf Warrior 2. Billy, I don't know if you've seen this. We've been following this movie all year. It's like a phenomenon in China.
Somehow, yeah.
It is a phenomenon in China. It jumps Guardians of the Galaxy to be the 4th highest grossing release of the year. Almost all of that money from its Chinese release. Spider-Man Homecoming had a great weekend. Second weekend in China. It's now made over $100 million. It's going to jump Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and actually be despite Guardians being a higher grossing movie here in the States, Spider-Man Homecoming is actually going to outgross it worldwide.
Wow.
So
that's insane.
That's pretty crazy to think that Spider-Man is, Guardians and Spider-Man going back and forth. Spider-Man's got a great shot at becoming the highest grossing Spider-Man movie, jumping Spider-Man 3 worldwide. Of course, again, not adjusting for inflation. A couple other things. War for Planet of the Apes made about $60 million in China over the weekend, so still a bit of a box office disappointment, but it's doing well overseas. It's making some of that money back, which is great. I really like that movie. And Dunkirk crossing the $500 million mark. It has now made over $500 million globally.
Not bad for a period piece drama set in the middle of summer.
Yeah, not bad for a summer release experimental narrative time shifting war drama.
Right. I mean, maybe they look. I know it's not quite the same thing, but maybe they were thinking the audience likes these kind of out there movies with Dunkirk. Maybe it'll work for Mother, and it just didn't quite. And we have Jennifer Lawrence.
I think they just knew that no one was going to go see this movie.
So you just had to get it out.
I think they realized, they saw the movie, and I think they realized, like, okay, Aronofsky went nuts with this, however much, $30 million we gave him. Like, he went absolutely crazy. We don't think anyone is going to go see this if we try to do the gradual thing. So let's just get what we can. That's my theory.
Let's see if that Oscar campaign heats up in a couple months, if we'll be seeing Mother billboards. I mean, especially around our parts.
It'll have to. This is the thing. This is one of those movies that's going to be popular in LA and New York because it's a $30 million art house film. I mean, it's as experimental as any $500,000 art house movie I've ever seen. I mean, it is out there, man. It is wacky. It is nuts. Some people liked it. That's great. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. It wasn't for me. But yeah, it's. I hope that they don't. I hope they don't take the lesson though that they're going to punish bold filmmaking, because it's bold. I will admit it is bold filmmaking, and I hope they don't say like, well, that doesn't work. Like, it does work. You just have to know the right place.
So far opposite the other end of a Transformers. That's like, let's split the difference and start there.
Yeah, exactly. Or just allocate your resources and your expectations correctly. Anyway, I hope that's not what happens. The lesson taken is like, don't give filmmakers a chance to experiment, because they should be given that. Just, I think you got to make sure you're doing everything right. Well, that wraps up this week. Next week is going to be really interesting because we have 3 wide releases. We have Lego Ninjago movie. We got Kingsman: The Golden Circle. We have another horror movie, Friend Request, coming out, plus the 3rd week of It. So I don't know where any of those are going to fall. Kingsman opened to $36 million in 2015. Lego Batman opened to $53 million in February. I don't know how all of these are going to open well.
How did September become more exciting than August?
I know, right? Like, you couldn't take one of these movies and put them in August? Like, we were doing nothing. I was weeping at the lack of movies in August. Now they're all coming out in September. This is nuts. I don't know what they're doing. But it should be an interesting show next week when we break down all that. I'd like to thank Billy for joining me. Thanks you so much.
Thanks for having me, man.
And thank you for watching. We'll be here next week to see how all these movies stacked out and shuffled out, and how it did, and if anything disappointed, or maybe everything opened well. Who knows? We'll see. Find out right here next Monday. Until then, thanks for watching. Thanks for watching Screen Junkies News. You can click, select, tap, whatever you want. The box is on screen to watch even more Screen Junkies News, and don't forget to click the logo to subscribe.